People who fought their bullies back, what were the consequences? I was bullied physically and emotionally on and off by one guy who would egg on everyone else in the class to join in. It was a brutal time in my life. I enrolled in karate, but still lacked confidence to do anything about it. I'm a really gentle person, so causing harm to someone really takes purposeful effort on my part. One day after a few months of karate, he decided to start that shit up again. He started pushing me around and taunting me. He had no idea I had been taking karate, mostly because I didn't have anyone to talk to in those days. I just kept walking away, and he'd get back in my face about it. The part that hurt was a childhood friend happened to be nearby and watching this. We weren't friends anymore, but he'd never joined in the class-wide taunting. He had a reputation to maintain too, so I respected that he just remained silent. But this day he started laughing along with the bullying. That just kind of set something off, and I went straight at the bully. I didn't use a single thing I learned in karate. Not a scrap. I pounced on him and used my body weight to topple him to the ground. While on top of him, I started screaming at the top of my lungs while punching him in the chest and stomach. I stopped when my whole body hurt from adrenaline, and I realized he was crying. I ran to the bathroom and had a panic attack from hurting someone. I felt terrible even hurting this asshole. I threw up my mouth a few times. Went back to class at 10 to 15 minutes late. He wasn't bloody or bruised, but he was clearly in a fight. Since the teacher didn't give a fuck that I was being bullied, she certainly didn't give a fuck that the class D-bag got in a fight. But she didn't say a word about me being late. She didn't even acknowledge me re-entering the room when she was mid-lesson. Everyone knew what happened. Nobody said anything. Nobody warmed up to me after that either. The bully didn't avoid me, but he didn't talk to me again either. In later years, when people had some more maturity, people told me they were happy I beat the shit out of him, but didn't know how the popular kids would react to it, since it wasn't a stand-up fight. The feral nature of my attack was a grey area for 11-year-olds, and they didn't really know if I should be considered a badass or a lunatic. We'll call him Mac. Mac was an arrogant jock-type dude. Played on the football team. Privileged home life from what everyone could tell. His bullying actions were always a show in front of his friends. He'd build himself up by putting others down, and was extremely easy to embarrass because of this. I realized at the time that he acted the way he did because of some sort of inferiority complex. In retrospect, it actually makes me feel a little sorry for him. But we are all responsible for our own actions. I'm a short guy, 5 feet 3 inches. Being short is something that a lot of guys are insecure about. Some people get a Napoleon complex because of it. Some people get deep into a self-loathing mindset about it. I like to think I've found a good middle ground. I don't let it define me as a person. Height isn't something I notice about people, nor that I actively think about unless it's brought up. But being a short person is something that people notice about you, and because so many people are insecure about it, it's something that kids find easy to weaponize against you. So it's something that helped me grow thick skin and not put up with people's shit through school. That said, I'm also very easy to get along with. Like most people, if you show me respect, I'll show you respect. Mac and I never saw eye to eye because his arrogance and bullying was always at odds with my unwillingness to deal with his shit. For the most part, he left me alone because I wasn't an easy target. My two best friends at the time were a guy who was going through some complications from Crohn's disease and a girl who was fairly well liked throughout the school but was a little emotionally volatile. We were all sitting in lunch one day, just talking about whatever when Mac walked in, flipping a few chairs and just making a spectacle of himself. He sat with his group of friends for a little while, all of whom were decent guys and well liked by most of the school. Then, for whatever reason, Mac got up and walked over to my buddy with Crohn's and made some threat about punching him in the stomach, which, I'm assuming, would have exacerbated the problems that he'd already been in and out of the hospital for throughout most of the year. Our other friend said something to defend him, and Mac made a grotesque sexual threat before calling her a dirty cunt. She got a little flustered at this point and didn't know what to say. He'd been doing shit like this all year. I just sort of made eye contact with Mac as he walked away. I mulled over my options for my remaining 2 periods and decided to have a talk with him at his locker as people were clearing out for the day. As I approached Mac, he was talking with his girlfriend and a few of his other buddies. So, he made some dick-headed gesture toward me. He either gave me the finger or made some comment about a midget. I don't remember. What I do remember though, is that this changed my conversation from a hey, man kind of talk, to more of an alright, asshole sort of discussion. I essentially told him to cut his shit, and that nobody is impressed by his half-assed displays of machoism. His response to this was to puff out his chest and say, "And what the fuck are you gonna do about it?" I closed the gap between us, looked him in the eye, and said, "I will beat you into the dust in front of all of your friends. Then, I will pick you up and carry your bloody ass through these halls as my little trophy beach. So either drop your tough guy act with your puffed out chest, or throw a punch and show me you're serious." He just sort of deflated after that and looked away from me. So I said alright and walked away. This whole scenario was admittedly just me calling his bluff. He'd never actually been in any kind of situation like that off of the football field. I'd been skateboarding my entire life. He was physically a bigger person than me, but I could take a hit, and he knew it. So I banked on the fact that he wouldn't risk it in front of his friends. Thankfully I was right, because while I'm sure I could have put up a fight, he absolutely had the physical advantage. So neither one of us would have really walked away a winner. I can't say for sure what it was that did it. Maybe I just embarrassed him enough in front of his friends. Maybe my confidence in that situation actually scared him. Or maybe he actually started to gain a little respect for me. Whatever it was that did it, he stopped directing his overt displays of superiority at people after this little encounter. Instead he started doing things like making a display of drinking vodka at school to seem edgy and cool. Obviously his showmanship got him caught doing stupid things, but that's not the point. The point is that he was still a douchebag. He just stopped being a bully. This one fat butch beach used to call me names like ho and ho. I think it was because I have a large chest, username is a joke by the way, and dressed provocatively to show off my figure as did do most HS teens. Good figures. Especially the ones over sexualized at an early age due to sexual abuse at home. Anyways, we also shared a female friend. When that friend was mad at me, she would talk shit about me to other girl. This of course gave excuse to the butch fat beach to bully me more. Most any girl who has ever been to HS probably knows the exact dynamics I'm talking about here. Fat butch bully beach never said stuff directly to me. It was either under her breath, via this other friend, or just loud enough, while stage whispering to her own posse, so I could hear it, but technically not meant for me. One day we were both alone in hallway. She came from other direction singing some rap song about that hoe, and that beach doing this and that. I yelled at her like straight out of Taxi Driver, "Are you talking to me?" I even motioned to myself, and shook my head both so very not me. No idea where it came from. Just pent up frustration I guess, because this was going on for over 2 years. In response, she mumbled some low-grade insult in her best fake ghetto white girl accent and kept walking. After art class, yes, it happened during my advanced portfolio art class and I even remember what skirt and sweater I was wearing. She gathered like 5 of her friends around my locker to kick my ass. A lot of people were just standing around watching, including our said mutual friend who was friends W both of us, and ob's cold de-escalated sheet. I was afraid af, and she's yelling, "Who do you think you are?" and gesturing and waving fists while her friends both male and female called me names and egged her on. Then, all of a sudden, one of my best friends, a small and short athletic type who had good faith with most everyone, runs in front of me and blocks me from her, telling her calmly not to do anything. This apparently worked, or at least stalled her long enough, because teachers came and broke it up soon after. We both got spoken to by the vice principal and bully was threatening to jump me someday when I walked home, so this was very tense for me for the rest of the year. But besides me worrying about this for a few months, she never talked shit again. Ever. For the next 2 years. Not only that, she was a huge bully to others, literally and figuratively, and I gained a reputation for being semi-badass for standing up to her. A lower classman once actually asked a friend of mine, "What's it like being friend-send?" which made me feel pretty special. I don't know the American or British equivalents of how the school system here works, so I'll just use age. When I was 9 years old, I got transferred to a new school. Another story, also kind of big, if someone asks I'll tell. There was this kid who would bully me. It starts verbal and then turns physical if I say or do anything, even if I try to walk away or ignore him. Well, I had to go through this for 3 years because the 3 teachers I had back then were such pieces of shit who didn't care about the students. Well, I genuinely liked my teacher I had 4 years after the bullying started. He was kind, fair, he would make jokes and lessons were actually fun. In one of the many breaks we had that year, we were playing outside. I was playing with a few friends. Then the bully suddenly joined the group and started playing with us. Nothing bad was happening for a while until like 5 minutes before the break ends and we go back to class. The bully started bullying me again, calling me names and stuff, making fun of my height. I guess he was bored or something. Well, I was getting very sick of this because my life back then, like home, wasn't exactly very good too. He called me a rat and I called him a disappointment that nobody likes, but only plays and talks with because they feel bad for him. I don't know, I felt mean. Okay. He suddenly like gave me a kick that hit my right hip. I grabbed his leg and was pulling it so he would fall. Well, some classmates came and took us apart. When they thought it was over, the bell rang, so we had to go back to class. I was the closest to the door, so I started walking, and I would be there first if I didn't turn around, ran towards the bully, and do like one of those slide kick thingies which throws the bully's legs in the air and he fell on the ground. I played a lot of Saints Row and stuff. Okay, and by the way, that move looks like the one you can do in Dishonored 2. Now I think about it, the non-lethal non-stealth takeout. I then grabbed his head and smashed it into the ground multiple times, hit him in the balls a couple of times, and kicked the shit out of his head. It was like one of those red wide eyes where you don't care about the consequences, you just want someone dead. And all this time the group that put us apart earlier was looking like what the fuck is happening. The rest of the class was already inside and the door was locked. The bully ran crying. I mean, he was like 12 and was stomping on the door to have the teachers bring him inside. He was crying and everything. Meanwhile the group was looking at me and I was thinking, like, what the fuck did I do? The teacher knew what I did, why I did it, how I did, that the bully deserved it, and held a long speech with the bully. He was all cleaned up, but this was like 10 minutes after the event, so he was still hurting and just let me go. The parents of the bully didn't care, and my parents didn't even know I was being bullied and what happened. My teacher knew everything, so he also knew that it wasn't the best thing to be like, hey, your son almost murdered a classmate, but it's good, he was being bullied, so we kept it a secret. They later learned that I was being bullied, but they still don't know what I did. Thank God. I was only ever bullied by one person, and it went on for about a month. Gonna be a long story as I remember it all vividly, and I think the points are crucial to get across. A bit of backstory. It was during year 8 at my secondary school, so I'd be between 12 to 13, and I've always been quite tall. I was probably around 6 foot at the time, but the guy who bullied me was probably 5 feet 2 or something at the time. He was in most of my classes and was called Matt and was one of the dickheads every school has. Proper chav kinda guy who'd pick on anyone that didn't stand up for themselves to him. Anyway, he started bullying me. He'd call me names, hit me, hide my things, that sort of thing. But I never properly stood up for myself for a few reasons. 1. My dad always said that if I was ever excluded, that he'd send me to boarding school, and 2. Standing up for myself simply didn't feel like an option. I was scared and didn't want to get hurt, which is weird as my dad taught me how to box when I was a kid. So the bullying goes on and on. I'd bunk classes so I didn't have to face him, and would come home from school crying until one day my dad came to ask me why I was always so upset. So I told him what was going on at school and how frightened I was of this kid constantly picking on me and hurting me. My dad listened and then told me I needed to stand up for myself and fight back, as it's the only real way of stopping a bully at school, and that I wouldn't. go to boarding school. If I was excluded, he'd fight tooth and nail on my side, as all I'd have done is stood up for myself at the end of the day. But our talk filled me with confidence that I have to stand up for myself or it'll keep happening. So I planned on confronting him the next time he bullied me, which just so happened to be the next day. It was during our last lesson of the day that he decided to pick on me. Normal stuff like accusing me of something or other that I didn't do as we walked past each other in one of the aisles between tables. I told him to fuck off and continued walking by him when he suddenly slapped the back of my head with a ruler. In that moment I suddenly lost it and I just turned round and started punching him over and over again. He tried to fight back at first, but as I said, I was way bigger and stronger than him and also knew how to throw punches, so he didn't really do anything. Eventually he climbed over a table and ran out of the classroom whilst the teacher calmed me down and took me to the head teacher's office. After that I remember shaking and crying due to the adrenaline wearing off, but also because it felt like such a release to just hit back. My parents were called to the school. My mum was a bit embarrassed, but my dad was proud of me for standing up for myself, and like he said he would, he stood up for me to the teachers and got my point across. The school wasn't happy about fighting, but understood why I did and why a kid can't just snitch, but decided not to suspend me from school. Instead they just suspended me from lessons for 2 days, basically like a 2-day detention, whilst the other kid was suspended for a week for bullying. As other kids came forward to verify my story, Matt tried telling people he beat me up, but given he had obvious marks and bruises on his face and I had none, no one believed him. Plus there were like 20 people who saw the fight. After that he was never able to properly bully people again, as people saw him as a weakling. I wasn't the last person to beat him up by any means. Always stand up for yourself, no matter the consequences. Sitting back and just accepting it is the worst thing you can do. I had a group of bullies that would follow me around outside of classes. None of them were actually in my classes. In high school, it usually remained limited to low-level name calling and some mild shoving, but it happened almost every day, so it was definitely a huge source of frustration. One day, after about 2 years of this, I had a really shitty day and my mood was absolutely below freezing point. I was already somewhat seething from a lot of stupid shit that had piled up throughout the day, and there they were again, blocking my passage in the hallway for the last class of the day. I had reached the limits of my teenage patience, and without thinking, I lashed out at them. In retaliation one of them knocked my glasses off and they fell to the floor, but luckily didn't shatter. That was the last straw for me, and I dealt a single blow. You couldn't quite call it a punch, it was a thrust of my arm straight forward. The base of my hand connected with the closest bully's nose, and a fountain of blood spewed forth. Before any of us had really taken in what had just happened, the guy was standing bent over, and a waterfall of blood was rushing down his face and onto the floor, which quickly started resembling a murder scene with the amount of blood involved. At that point realization kicked in, and the rest of the bullies were ready to tear me a new one, but the commotion had attracted teachers who quickly drove us apart. Apparently, my blow had managed to break the guy's nose, which explains the blood explosion. Because of the countless people running around and through the pooled blood on the ground, the entire playground was soon covered in bloody footprints. It was like something out of a slasher movie. What happened next may surprise you. The bullies immediately swore revenge, and school punished me, but not very thoroughly, because they acknowledged that I'd been pushed over the edge first. Then the guy whose nose I'd broken contacted me, and I feared the worst: revenge, restitution, monetary compensation. But no, he actually apologized to me and told me they were way out of line and my reaction was deserved. He got the other guys to back off me, and they never bothered me again. My reputation as bully nosebreaker kept me safe for the rest of my years at that school. So all in all, I guess violence sometimes does solve problems, although I wouldn't exactly recommend it as a blanket catch-all solution. But yeah. My bully was my older brother. I didn't fight back until I was in my mid-20s. It was Christmas Eve and he started a fight over some trivial nonsense and I snapped a bit. Long story short, he wound up in the hospital. Nothing serious, he was just angry and wanted to punish me and tried to press charges. The cops convinced him not to, and I drove down to Boston to visit my girlfriend at her college. Everyone had my back, including his then wife. Everyone agreed he acted like a child and finally got what he had coming for a long time. My dad was proud of me, but since he had grown up learning he could do no wrong, that he could beat the shit out of me and have no consequences, he didn't know how to handle the situation. So he disappeared. Literally. He took his wife and kids and never spoke to my family, including my grandparents, aunts/uncles, cousins, who had nothing to do with it. I felt so guilty because my grandmother is now in her mid-80s and has still yet to meet her only great-grandchildren. He eventually got divorced. He'll say she was crazy, but they were both unstable, and he had a pill addiction. He was also violent and abused his wife, so they're better off separated. When he needed money for lawyers, he decided to come back by means of faking a suicide attempt to garner sympathy. This was bullshit, by the way, because he had bullied me so badly that I attempted suicide when I was only 12. I was recently diagnosed with PTSD and have been taking medication for major depressive disorder for 18 years now, but he made a joke of mental illness just to get some cash. I still don't talk to him. My family keeps him at arm's reach. Everyone now knows how much of a monster he is and takes everything he says and does with a grain of salt. After the fight, my life turned around. I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu so I'd never be bullied or hurt again. I went back to college, went to grad school, moved halfway across the country and work as a data scientist. Life is better for me now that he's out of it. The hardest part of it all is that I grew up in an Italian/Irish family where we were taught that family is forever. It's been tough learning that family doesn't have to mean friends. That I have the choice of who can be in my life and I can choose to leave people out. Spent about 6 months being bullied by this guy when I was about 13. He took my school lunch off me a few times, took my pocket money, or sometimes he'd casually walk by me and punch me on the shoulder and laugh about it, stuff like that. I took it quietly for months. One day, I arrived in the classroom 5 minutes before class was to begin. The bully was there along with his friend. We were the only ones in the classroom. They were talking about monkeys and I walked by and said something along the lines of, "Nah, you're a monkey." He came right up to me, stuck his chest out, and started provoking me. He was a bit on the chubby side and got into fights frequently. I was a skinny kid and was no good at fighting. I punched him in the chest 3 or 4 times to no effect. He went for my face and knocked me clean out with one punch. We both got sent home for the day. My parents were furious at me. The teacher called up my parents. She didn't see me provoking the guy and fully defended me for my reputation for being a good kid, while the other guy got kicked out of 2 schools already. So the next day me and Mr. Bully were sent to the principal's office. There were these 2 benches right by the principal's door, in a corridor facing each other. We waited for the principal to call us in for about 20 minutes or so. So there we were, each sitting on a bench and looking at each other in silence. I felt confident because everyone was backing me up, even though I was the one to start the fight. The bully looked at me and asked me, "So, what are we gonna do?" And I replied with, "I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be fine and you're screwed." The bully breaks down in tears, to my surprise. Cried about getting kicked out of yet another school and having no friends. I thought, this is not what I expected. The principal opens the door, calls us into his office with this tired, long day kind of look on his face. As I sat next to the bully across the principal's desk, the principal takes a long sigh and says, "Okay, so what am I going to do with you two?" I felt sorry for the bully, so I stepped up and said, "Look, we have talked it out, and we're both very sorry, and we promise it won't happen again." The principal was pleasantly surprised and decided to let us both go without consequences. After that, the bully treated me like I was his best friend. We got on pretty well for years after that. My mother was a high-strung woman, always complaining about bills and how my father should have picked a better line of work. She transferred these worries to my 6-year-old self, and I was unsure of what she was talking about most of the time. This continued for about a year until one day she strapped me into my car seat and sat down in front of me, started the car, yelled that it was all my fault, and tied a plastic bag over her mouth and nose. My father was very distraught when he arrived home, finding me in the car with my suffocated mother, but he was thankful that my mother had failed to take my life as well, because she had poorly tied the rubber hose over the exhaust pipe. While it would have traumatized most children to see their own mother die in front of them, I knew that she did it because she was selfish and abandoned me and my father. My father soon quit his job as a freelance writer and used his degree to get a job as a high school teacher. Not a great profession, but more steady and better paying. He didn't blame me for my mother's suicide, and he actually seemed happier and took more of an interest in my life. We spent many fond hours playing Battlefront on my Xbox and fishing in the land of 10,000 lakes. When I was 10, the PTSD began. I would have flashbacks of my mother gasping heavily into that plastic bag and then her eyes rolling back into her head. The first flashback happened in my 6th grade history class when my teacher showed us a film about the Holocaust and gas chambers. That all brought back my repressed memories and I ran to the bathroom to hide. I was found in a bathroom stall with a car and a female stick figure drawn with X'd out eyes, all of which were drawn in my own feces. My father was immediately called and he picked me up from school within 15 minutes. He was very understanding and explained to the principal about my mother's suicide, and I was not punished at home or at school, at least not officially. From that day onwards, I was known as the Sheet Phantom, and the flashbacks didn't stop, nor did the harassment from the other students. One student in particular, Roger, was terribly cruel to me. Him and his crony Simon would mercilessly call me the Sheet Phantom and taunt me about my dead mother and how she killed herself so she wouldn't have to deal with me. This was too much for my 10-year-old self to handle, and Roger and Simon would pay. Nobody wanted to be friends with me, and my father was my only true friend. How that would soon change. The next day, I asked my dad to take me to Chipotle, and we shared what would be our last meal before the incident. When I woke up the next morning, I began consuming large amounts of X-Lax. As soon as I went to my locker, Roger and Simon approached me and began to taunt me as usual. I still remember the words that pushed me over the edge. "You autistic freak. I bet your dad wishes he had pulled out, and I bet your mother wishes she had swallowed. Oh wait, she can't, because she is worm's food." I snapped. I pulled the diarrhea-filled plastic bags out of my locker, one in each hand, and swung them at Roger and Simon. Both bags exploded all over their faces and they scampered off to the principal's office, drenched in my cold, wet feces to report me. The DNA tests proved that it was my feces, but I didn't care. Everyone knew not to fuck with the Sheet Phantom. My father picked me up from school early again, this time clearly angry, a state in which I had never seen him before. He wouldn't even speak to me. On the way home we stopped at Menard's, and he went in, while I waited in the car, then came back 5 minutes later with a box under his arm. We finished the ride home in silence. Upon our arrival home, my father took me into the basement and told me that this time I had to be punished. He then told me to open the box from Menard's, since my punishment was in there. Scared beyond belief, I opened the box. Inside were a pair of shiny jumper cables. I've told this on Reddit before, but since it's a direct question I'll say it again. I'm Asian and I grew up in the rural south of America in the 80s and 90s. So there were no other Asians and racism was pretty rampant. Not only that, but I was a very small child, always the smallest in my grade. Plus I moved around every few years, so I changed schools a lot. And it all culminated in the fact I was fairly quiet, not very outgoing, and really just kind of weird. If kids were going to pick on someone they would pick on me. If you keep coming to teachers because kids keep picking on you, they just kind of stop caring. Some don't really care to begin with. Here's the thing though, I've never really been one to back down from confrontation. So generally things just escalated to a fight pretty quickly. When I went to a kind of ghetto school in South Carolina I got in 4 fights in my first day, before I was suspended, just because kids messed with me, and I didn't back down. I learned that, if you fought your bullies all you had to do is hurt them in the fight. You didn't have to win. Even if you lost the fight and cried, they wouldn't pick on you again. Bullying works by intimidating people enough that you don't actually have to risk anything. They are looking to gain status purely based on fear. By fighting back hard enough to hurt them, then you change the equation for them. They might be able to win, but they now have to pay something for that win. Nobody is going to beat you up every week if it means they get kicked in the balls every week. They'll just find the people who are afraid to fight back. As far as the administration goes, you get suspended. But that's not a big deal. My parents didn't care that much, and you get suspended 2 to 3 times because you got into a fight with the biggest kids in the school, and then nobody is going to bother to mess with you much. I thought of the suspension days as days off. This changes a bit when you get to high school, when they start arresting you for fighting. Copied first bit from a question before. Knocked out one of his teeth with a textbook in like 3rd grade, might have been 4th. Had the teacher/principal not stopped me, I might have probably killed him. He been just a constant pain in my existence. Since 1st grade he and another kid everyday constant shit talking and name calling, pushing, prodding me. Finally snapped. Didn't realize what I had done till the principal had pulled me off him. Seeing what I did when I lost control made me pretty well from that day, since short of constantly be in control of my emotions, suppressing them if need be, probably why I feel I can hide my depression from everyone, probably even caused it in a way. Still had name calling, but I laughed at it, and those that still called me names made jokes at my expense. Learned to not push it. As far as school punishment, I had to sit in the principal's office during recess for a few weeks, but it wasn't really a punishment as we just had dessert from lunch or just talked some. I don't remember how my parents reacted, doubt they were even told. Kid left her before the year was up. After the incident he was picked on some by the other kids as a person half his size had beat him up so thoroughly. A few years later, in probably 8th grade, might have been 7th, the kid was picking on a special kid. He wasn't really all there most of the time, he seemed normal, but what of these I don't know, fits I guess, and the kid always picked on him for it. I told him to stop picking on the kid, and then he started directing it towards me. I told him to stop, that he wouldn't like how it would end. Even some of my friends told him to leave me alone, but he didn't. One day at lunch he poured my milk out all over my lunch I had just got. I jumped up and basically strangled him. I ran off after I realized what I'd done, down to the basketball court and sat alone for a while till a teacher found me. Hated myself for losing control of myself like that. Spent several days with after school detention for it and grounded for a week at home. My own self-punishment was more severe than anyone would probably know, and in hindsight, now that I think about, might have been the first time I felt my new miserable self. I had quite a number of bullies throughout my school career. When I was in 6th grade it was really bad. Kids would make fun of me, call me names. Heck, there was one bastard that would jump in my face and call me ugly. Usually I'd like getting to class first. Don't know why, cause I hated the whole faking place, but I did. One is hat named Javier, yep that's his name, would harass me verbally, and he noticed that I liked getting to my next hour class first, so he would intentionally get ahead of me. I know he did this intentionally cause he would constantly look back with a wide happy smirk on his face. One day I had enough, and I caught up to him a little bit and grabbed him by the back of his shirt, specifically the collar, and pulled him back. It wasn't much, but here's where shit hits the fan. You see, this was the first year a new principal was in charge of the school, and fun fact is that he was the former vice principal's husband. His name is Mr. Russell. My god, did his sheet excuse of back quote helping stop the bullying was horrible, cause he basically did jack shit. So you wanna know what he does when he gets word of me grabbing the back of Javier's shirt to pull him back a little? He calls the faking cops. I shit you not, he called the police, had an officer come into the office with me, and there, I did not get arrested, but the officer was there to state that it counted as assault, which is against the law, etc, etc, the whole mumbo jumbo bullshit. Then he tells my mom that he's planning on putting the incident on my permanent record and some other kinds of bullshit that will basically make me look like a bad kid for the rest of my school career. She flipped. She knew how horrible the bullying was for me and that they weren't doing anything about it, and now she hears that the principal, who also knew that this bullshit was constantly going on and wasn't doing anything, and most likely wasn't gonna do a damn thing either, decided that the one time I lay my hands on one of my bullies, and again it wasn't much at all, that he was basically going to do something to my records. Now that I'm thinking about it, he might have wanted to put me down as a violent kid or something. Maybe he wanted to send me to juvie over this, I don't know, and even brought in a police officer. She knew that his couldn't go on, so she pulled me out of that school. They begged her not to cause they said that they would help her, me, and stop the bullying, when she damn well knew they weren't gonna do jack shit about that, and that they only wanted me to stay for money reasons. Schools get money for every student, plus cause of the whole financial thing that just went down that year at the school. Fuck you Bubus. Heck, they knew their sorry excuse of helping me with the bullying was making me suicidal. I was 12. And yet they had the audacity to still beg her to keep me in the school. My mom then attempted to homeschool me. It didn't go well, and I failed the 6th grade. I got enrolled in a different school next school year in the 6th grade, and was much better off there. And the real kicker, if all this bullshit, Mr. Russell is still the principal there. I hope to God that fat idiot got his act together, cause he damn well almost killed me with his excuse of being principal. I moved around a lot and am a small guy, always have been. So, as you can imagine, I fought a lot of bullies. Most of them cut the sheet when you make them hurt for messing with you. But there was this one guy. Let's call him Jake. Jake just loved to cause pain and didn't seem to feel pain himself, or fed on it, or thought he deserved it, or was a masochist, or whatever. Didn't matter to 12-year-old me who just wanted to get through those 3 years in peace. I'd finally had enough one day. I simply couldn't handle the daily fights or the ignorant lazy platitudes of dumb as adult females who don't or never had to put up with it. My parents were considering legal action, and I was at the end. So, I took a couple rolls of dimes to school in my pockets, and when his inevitable bullshit started, I skipped the faking foreplay. I went straight to violence with this sheet bag. That first punch sent him reeling, and the look of shock at being hit so damned hard he certainly was seeing stars made me laugh. Not one for half measures or hesitation. I move in and give him 2 more tooth-shattering bashes to the face and a kick to the shin so hard he couldn't even scream. Down he went, but I wasn't done. An example needed to be made. I mounted him like a faking and cooperative donkey and began hammering him all over. Back of the head, back of the neck, and any hard points of bone like the elbow and ribs got a direct strike from the coin rolls themselves. He began screaming, and I began losing it. He managed to throw me off, but that only earned him a kick in the ribs while he was down. Now he was on his back, and I set a knee upon his stomach and gave his front the same treatment his back had received. I beat that kid so badly he went limp, so I beat the fuck out of him some more. By this point, other kids and teachers are starting to approach to try and break it up, so I throw the dime rolls into the forest as hard as I could and give him a nice parting shot to the dick as I'm hauled away. I went away with a 2-week suspension, nearly failed that grade, but managed to pull it out with almost perfect final exams. I never saw Jake again, and I never knew what eventually became of him. I'd like to think all those tooth replacements and facial scars served to remind him never to fuck with anyone ever again. 2/10. Would not recommend. I spent a year in a Waldorf school in Norway. I'm Danish, and in case you didn't know, Danish and Norwegian languages are similar enough for us to understand each other. Anyway, I was mentally and physically bullied by this one dude. We were close to 18 years old, and he bullied me by deliberately calling me names he knew I didn't like. He wouldn't call me by my name, but just refer to me as that Danish girl. He would push me around in gym class, to the point where the teacher would have me do yoga somewhere else. As in, the culprit wasn't excluded, I was. I talked to a classmate about this once. I told her how it hurt to be talked to like that, and jerked around. I told her how angry it made me that we were all supposed to be legally adults by now, but he couldn't act like one. She understood and listened. A couple of days after, the bully, in a break, when we were alone in the classroom, just the two of us, and I was just sitting there minding my own business, he said the following to me, and I just listened. "Hey, Danish girl. Classmate's name, told me you called me immature. She said you called me immature. Don't even try to say you didn't. I had opened my mouth to confirm I had said this. He didn't let me. If you ever badmouth me to others again, I will know about it, and I will make your life a living hell. And then people started coming back in from break. The next day, I went to the principal and to the main teacher of the class and told them I wanted to change classes. I told them of the bullying that had been going on, and I told them my classmates were in on it, since I couldn't talk to them about it without him knowing. The principal told me they would talk to the boys involved and warn them, and that if they ever bothered me again they would be expelled. The next day, 3 boys were called to talk to the principal. 2 of them personally apologized to me, and then never bothered me again. They just pretended I didn't exist, which was better than being bullied. The third, the living hell, dude, didn't talk to me or bother me for a week, and then went back to the same behavior. I went to the principal, he got another warning. Another 2 weeks, another warning. When I went the third time I was told they wouldn't expel him, because the end of the year was so close. I told them that, since they had warned him, they should follow through and expel him, since he apparently thought his actions wouldn't have consequences, and he should be taught that. When they still didn't expel him, I moved back home. I left the class my ML and my MSN Messenger. About a month later, the boy I had a crush on from that class added me on Messenger, and I of course accepted. Turned out it was my bully, now calling me a hoe, going on and on about how he won the fight, and then logging off. I sent him an email a couple of days later, explaining in detail how I left because of problems at home with my parents, and how I was needed to take care of my mentally ill father. It wasn't a lie, I just left out anything having to do with the bullying. I ended the email stating I didn't have anything against him, and that I hoped he would find his way well in life. I never got a reply, but I don't really care. To me, he wasn't the real villain. TLDR, dude bullied me for a year, classmates in on it, left the class, got my ultimate revenge by forgiving him in an email. After about a year, my dad found out that I was being bullied and that the school had failed to do anything about it. So he gave me a very simple piece of advice. Next time he tries anything, tell him he's got 3 strikes, and that was his first. If he does it again, don't give him a second warning or a strike 2, just clock him. I did this during a class. Rather than punch him though, I grabbed his arm and used it to lever his head into the table. He was sat next to me, then pulled it back until it was about to come out of its socket. The shock of not only the fact that I could hurt him, I was physically much bigger than him, but that I would do so unpredictably, meant that he left me alone from then on. A couple of years later I found myself being the only foreign kid in a fairly rough school in France. The school bully / joke was famously stupid, but he was the only kid in the year to have been all the way through puberty. He had been held back for 2 years for bad grades, so was 15 when the rest of the year was 13. He thought it would be a good idea to pick on me in the playground in front of a crowd. Now, I wasn't as big as him, but again, I found myself bigger than most of the Frenchers. Why were they all stunted? Also, by this point I'd taken a couple of years of judo. He threatened me, and I told him to lay off, because I knew judo. He mocked me, and started doing fake karate chops, and what have you, and dared me to use some judo on him. So I did, and laid him flat on his back. Most of the kids gathered round had a laugh, which he didn't like, so a few days later he collared me in a slightly darker, quieter part of the playground with a couple of his cronies, and said he was going to kick my ass. Almost before the sentence had left his mouth, I brought my right foot straight up into his plums, and I swear I felt one of them almost burst against my instep. He dropped to the floor like a sack of shit, and didn't get up for about 5 minutes from what I heard. He didn't bother me again. Reading that back, it sounds like a scene from a crappy made for TV coming of age film. But that's what happened. I was in 2nd grade, and like most of the stories here, some older kid just took a shining to me. I don't even remember all the things he would do, but it felt relentless. Every day at lunch he'd grab me and pin me up against the wall while I cried for help and nobody did. Why didn't anybody help? Screaming at me or whatever else. I didn't know what to do, so at dinner one night I mentioned it to my family. I remember my dad being super annoyed at my sister, like wondering why she wasn't doing more to look out for her younger brother. She just looked down at her food in pain, shame and silence. I don't blame her though. She was in the 5th grade and 5th graders had their own shit to deal with. The next day, instead of mum picking us up from school, it was dad. Now our community wasn't too widespread. By that I mean, if you went to this primary school, you had to live nearby, so most kids walked home. So dad picks us up, and this is already a red flag, because dad never picks us up from school. As we are driving home though, past all the school kids, he slows the fuck down and asks me, who is it? Which one of these kids is giving you a hard time? And I'm like, oh god, no dad, no, let's just go home. Please don't do this. He's dad though, and dads can be hella persuasive. Who the fuck is it? I see the kid, and he's walking along with his cronies, having a jolly good time. I'm sure he felt like he had a fun and productive day at school. Dad pulls over. Dad gets out of the car. Dad yells his name. All the school kids turn around and realize what's happening. They faking back away from the kid like he's got an illness. Dad walks up to him and just lets loose. You bullying my kid. His arm flies backwards pointing at the car I'm sitting in. All the school kids turn and look at me. I'm dying inside. The bully, his frightened face gazing at me through the car window. I look solemnly back at him. Dad continues, you leave him the fuck alone. You got it? If he comes home and tells me one more story about you, you're dead, kid. You got it? Don't faking touch my son again. Do you understand? The kid whimpered yes tearfully. Dad walked back into the car. I sat there stunned. At the time, I hated him for doing that. It was beyond embarrassing. But I never got bullied again by that kid. You probably couldn't get away with doing that today, but it was a bit different in the 90s. I don't hold a lot of affection for my father. He was a deeply flawed person, and without getting too deep into his failures of being a father, I just want to add that recalling this memory for the first time in many years, and now that he's passed away, I can appreciate that he cared. He wasn't capable of showing it like in the movies or shows that have perfect awesome fathers. But dude cared enough to do this retarded thing to stop his kid from being bullied. I have 3 stories related to this. When I was in 2nd grade I was bullied on the bus and called all sorts of names. One day I had enough and yelled at them, told them how mean they were and how I wasn't going to put up with it. From now on you won't call me those names. You'll call me Super Caleb. I immediately knew I made a mistake and regretted my choice. They laughed but they stopped. The bus driver might have had a word with them when me rant caught his attention. One of them became kinder and actually called me Super Caleb, but stopped when I admitted how silly that was and how it was fine just to call me Caleb. In high school, about sophomore junior year, there was this kid who was the ugliest and stupidest person I have ever met. He got a messed up face from riding a dirt bike at night without a headlight or helmet, trying to run from the police, who rode dirt bikes with headlights, and crashing through a barbed wire fence. His disfigured face was then used against anyone who tried to fight back. He would sexually harass the girls I hung out with, and when we tried to tell him to shove off, he and his gang of idiots would try to start a fight. When we called over to a teacher, he would claim we were making fun of his face and make us into the villain. The shit he got away with was infuriating. We got really close to blows multiple times, but my vampire friend, another story for another time, did some digging and found out 2 helpful facts. First, the school had a way to get restraining orders against other students. Second, this ugly imbecile's own mother was the person who you went to for the paperwork for the restraining order. It was a risky move, but it ended up working out. My friend was asked the reason for the restraining order and he went into detail about all the crap the kid was pulling, including getting handsy with our girlfriends. The mother helped file the paperwork and promised to also have a word with her son about his behavior. The next day the kid and his group had their tails between their legs and avoided us like the plague. The group had a few encounters with him after that, but we would just quietly mention his mother and he would back off. My senior year was spent in a different high school. I ended up going to the worst school in the worst city in the worst state for education. Kids were on their 6th year of high school. Dropout rate was high. There were fights everywhere. This one kid heard we had moved from East LA. I didn't, but my brother actually did, and decided to see how gangster we were. Badmouthed us, nearly killed me when he shook a 20-foot ladder I was on the top of. Stagecraft class where I was putting up some scenery, tried to start shit, and got angry when we didn't let it provoke us. I told him to F.K. off, and that he was just a loser and a poser not worth my time. He told me he was going to kick my ass as soon as I walked out of class. I already had permission to stay late to finish setting up the scenery I was working on, so I just told him to F.K. off again and went back to work. I noticed he wasn't outside when I walked out, and noticed that he didn't show up to class the next day either. Turns out he had pissed off someone else, and they were waiting for him to walk out of the class that day. The kid got jumped, messed up, and then expelled because it was his third strike. I got bullied by a fair few people. Mostly just general insults I could brush off here or there, nothing violent. But grade 9 year, I had 2 incidents that just kind of set me off. One incident, this kid in a tech class kept harassing me. We were learning about resistors, building circuit boards, and it was my favorite class because we were planning to build a FM transmitter, and I was keenly interested in that. This kid, can't remember his name for the life of me, sat beside me and kept poking me. Something juvenile but incessant. Over the next few weeks I kept getting more and more frustrated and did all the right things like telling the teacher, asking him to stop, yada yada. Finally I just took a cheap Bic pencil, 0.5mm lead, and jammed it right back in his forearm. A nice long prolonged push till he had to move away from me. Got called in mid-science class and was told I was going to be suspended for 2 days. Violence wasn't the answer. Should have gone to the vice principal or something, even though I had never interacted with them at that point, let alone actually been in the school office area. Never had an incident before, and teachers and students knew I was generally nice and friendly. Some friends in that class make sure to tell the VP that I had sought help and I was defending myself, and my mom did the angry, I will call a lawyer because you allowed my son to be tormented for however long. Basically spent an hour in the library for 2 days instead of the tech class, then was allowed back in. More the illusion of punishment than anything else. Looking back on it, my mom was probably intimidating enough that the VP decided it wasn't worth it to stick with the full suspension, especially considering I was low risk of being a troublemaker in the future. Was kind of worth it. Gave me the confidence to deal with the more annoying gang of bullies who had been picking on me, and when they flicked something at me, I charged them instead of ignoring them. I got left alone after that. Moral of the story, always stand up to bullies. Tormented 4 years since elementary, it all stopped after I showed I was consistently willing to stand up for myself. When you are passive about your own defense, you are an easy target, because all the bully wants is that sense of power when they see you feel tormented and need to get help, even if they aren't brave enough to go after you with a teacher watching. Moment you stand up for yourself, you aren't satisfying to pick on, and they have to work harder to get the same thrill. Since my bully is a grown man, my father, it's a lot more financially. He has always been physically and mentally abusive, manipulating and the sort. My mom died when I was 10, hit by a drunk driver, so my dad became the sole parent. Ever since she died, I've been back and forth on Stockholm Syndrome and wanting to run away or wishing he would just die. I always told myself all I had to do was bide my time. I came into some money when I was 18 due to my mum's insurance. My father coerced me into buying a house, telling me he'd fix it up. He's a self-employed carpenter. I could rent it out and live wherever I wanted. Sounded good to me. So I buy it, but then there's this thing called taxes that I couldn't pay. I was a full-time college student and working as a waitress part-time. Not only was my father constantly calling me, harassing me for money to put into this house, he never fixes anything. About 2 years go by, the house sits there, and I'm living in it when I'm home from college with no heat. It beat the alternative of living with my father and his GF at the time and her twin daughters who, for whatever reason, hated me. Well, after 2 years, if you don't pay your taxes in New York they can auction your house. I panicked, called my dad, and told him I wanted to sell it. He doesn't say much, but the next thing I know, my taxes are suddenly paid. I found out later he borrowed money from my aunts. Still doesn't fix the house until his GF dumps his sorry ass for cheating on her, 4 years. So now he's sulking in my house. Him and his GF reconcile a bit, so he redoes his whole room. Not much else has changed. My older sister asks me if she could rent it and we agree. There's a reason they say not to rent to family. We set a very low price on rent, then she changes the lease agreement and tells me she'll pay $100 less. I tell her no, she doesn't like it. I evict her. And then evict my dad. He's bringing handwritten receipts saying I owe him money and puts a mechanics lien on my house for $35,000. He got someone to say I was legally served in New York, even though I was living in Co. and could prove it. I had to spend upwards of $2,500 proving I was innocent, and I still am. When we went to court, he told the judge I was a pothead. He had a picture of me holding an empty elephant bowl, tried to run me, and some cops over, punched my brother in the face for siding with me, and stole my mother's ashes. He then sold everything in my house including my Schecter Diamond series and other nostalgic things I'll never get back. And he completely demolished my house. Gutted it and everything. TLDR, my dad has been my bully my whole life and it's cost me over $2,500, my mother's ashes, my house and memorabilia to fight him. Oh, I can answer this one. After 7th grade my school closed and I went to a public school for 8th grade. Well, November rolls around and I have a solid number of friends, mostly because I was friends with a guy in my neighborhood that went to the school. There's one guy that was on my bus that was a massive dick. He was the pure embodiment of a white gangster. He wore black shirts, gold chains, shorts and pants low, and he talked a lot of tough talk. I never had any run-ins since we had different bus stops, although his was close, and different classes. Well, one day we're all on the bus and I'm with a friend who was kind of a shitty person, and out of nowhere something hits my arm and I feel a bunch of stuff sort of splatter on me. I look down and there's taco sauce all over my arm with the packet on my seat. Well, I get pissed and try to find out who did it. Eventually it turns out it was the white gangster. Well, since I was new and I thought he was trying to mess with me, I decided that I'd tell him to go fuck himself. More words were exchanged and eventually he mentioned something about how he could knock me out in one punch. Here's the thing, my dad made me take MMA classes and self-defense type stuff for a few months before this, so when he said that I laughed and said, "Yay, faking right, I'd like to see you try." So he tells me to get off at his stop. I say, "Fuck you, get off at mine." He agrees. He walks over to this field and we are both standing there waiting for some reason. I find out that we are waiting for some of his friends cause they wanted to watch. Now I'm already nervous. My adrenaline was going at maximum since I had never been in a real fight before. When I heard that, I thought I was gonna get jumped. So I say something like, "Why does dickhead need people to back him up? They swear they are just going to watch, not get involved." So the fight goes on. I ended up winning pretty easily and he pretty much didn't touch me. It was quite obvious he had no clue what he was doing. He held his fists like the mascot of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I ended up breaking my head on his head, which sucked, but I didn't really get in any trouble otherwise. The school had no clue about it, and my parents didn't punish me at all. They weren't happy about it, but they didn't give me any grief. I became sort of a celebrity at school for like a short while. Some of his friends came up to me and said that it was a really fun fight to watch. Someone recorded it, but I never got to see the recording. This is super long, but hopefully worth reading. Well, it depends which one. Keep in mind I probably caused half of it. I ended up in the air once when I stood up to this Fico kid in junior high. He ended up slamming my head into pretty much everything and shocking me. I was fine. It still hurt a lot, and I got suspended. The thing that pisses me off about that one is that I went to our teacher about moving seats because he was physically and verbally attacking me all class. The piece of shit teacher kind of made me lose all trust for asking adults for help, and I was just starting to trust again when he said, "No, you guys need to learn to get along." I never did anything or said anything mildly mean to him. One of the few I can say it about. He was just a bully. and I would have died if a classmate, a wrestler, hadn't pulled him off. If any teacher that has ever pulled that sheety, learn to get along line, know that you may be putting their life in danger because you don't want to deal with it. I'm a teacher's assistant and I deal with trying to help students who aren't getting along every day. I get it, not easy, but I will never use that faking line. They came to you for help, and they trust you. Don't fuck it up, or you will be forever known by that one line. If one of my kids is ever told that line, I will do my very best to get you fired. I don't want you in charge of my child. Back on topic. And a less emotional story. Another one was a back and forth bullying. We got in tons of fights, but we never got caught. Eventually he tried to bring a friend onto it. He's tried on multiple times in 2 days to knee me in the groin. But when he started following me kicking me, I turned and swung my trumpet case at his head. He ducked, and I caught my case in my office hand, and when he came up I was ready. He made the action movie scream, and held his face as he kicked his feet in pain. I just walked away, but a teacher heard him screaming and came. When he got there he thought the kid hit the pole. The first kid told him, and we got suspended. Later that day I had counseling, and when I told my therapist and my parents, they agreed and didn't have any way out. Best suspension ever. I didn't have trouble with those two again. We even kind of hung out a bit. I guess they figured out how serious it was. Another kid wasn't really targeting me, but had the "I'm so much better than you should worship me" attitude and let me know it. I had band class with him, and then science right after, and hour and a half of his crap every day got old. So, while waiting for the teacher to arrive I was getting pissed. I warned him, "If you keep talking I will punch you in the face." His response? "Do it." And I did, and we repeated. I pushed him at least 3 times before he reacted. We both got suspended, and it sucked. All of them were friends, sort of. One day I heard that the kid from the first story had slit the last kid's wrist on art class with an X-Acto knife. He went to juvie. I was so glad he was out of that school. I do feel sorry for him now. I also found out that his home life was a nightmare. I now hope he got the help he needed. No kid should have to go through that. I didn't really start trusting adults until my junior year. I had some amazing teachers who practically bent over backwards to help me. I owe them a lot. I repaired my relationship with my mom, and when I had a teacher whose classroom decor would have set me back years because of another issue, she kinda went mother bear on the school until they changed my schedule. The consequences are many. A lot of time missed in school. Some kids I stood up to became my friends. I have some PTSD when someone touches anywhere near my throat. As I mentioned, I'm now a TA, and my summer job is working at a scout camp with mostly kids about the same age I was when these stories happened. I'm very careful when dealing with bullying, and anytime a kid asks me for help, it is rarely easy to help, but it is worth it. Every second it takes. I've learned what works, and what probably won't work. Fighting probably won't. If anyone read this that is being bullied, don't give up. Keep trying to get help. There will be someone who will help you, just keep going. By the way, I don't usually swear, let alone type out curses, but there is no language strong enough to get my point across. When I was about 13 to 14 I was hanging out with friends and a boy from school, Steven, who was a few years older than me, started picking on me for no reason. I wouldn't say bullying, but certainly just trying to intimidate me. I don't understand why, but he really just didn't like me. It had gone on for a couple of weeks, and I had argued back, but he always tried to start shit. At the time a cable company in the UK, called NTL, had started digging the street up, laying the cable. When they were digging up the roads they put down the long plastic barriers to prevent people falling into the holes. Myself and some friends borrowed about 8 of the barriers and carried them to a grassy patch of spare ground to create a wrestling ring. The guy who had been giving me shit walked by and started on me again, so again I tell him to get faked again. He comes back about an hour later with a group of guys, some who I was actually friends with, and told us they were gonna use our makeshift ring for boxing. They had gloves with them and everything. My 2 friends start walking away, but I'm like, fuck that, we carried this sheet here, it's our ring. He throws a pair of the gloves at me and told me if I wanted to stay I'd have to fight. What he did not know is that I had been learning to box for about a year. One of the guys he was with, David, told him to cut his shit and to leave me alone. He also knew that I actually knew how to box, but didn't bring it up. Anyway, the dickhead insisted, and I assume, because he was older and taller, he thought it would be easy. He had absolutely no idea what he was doing. Anyone who has done any boxing before and then has been in a fist fight will understand what I mean when I say he was so uncoordinated and slow. He was lunging forward wildly and missing whilst just eating small jabs from me. After toying with him for about a minute, I could tell he was already getting tired. The guys at the side called it as round 1 over, and David told him to give it up, but he was so angry that I had embarrassed him that he wanted to keep going. He was so out of breath. We start again, and as he comes forward, and I shoot in really fast, and I crack him right in the nose with the right cross. He stood there looking in shock as the blood started coming out. It was almost a disbelief that I gained the ground and hit him. He walked away and never said a word to me again. I'm still friends with David. He told me died in a car crash about 6 years ago. It wasn't something a friend did, it was something I did. 10 years ago, when I was 16, I finally flew to meet up with some friends that I had known for a year. I had met one of the guys online, and the group really embraced me. For some context, I got bullied a lot in school, and it stuck with me socially to the point that I had no actual close friends, and was far from ever being a part of a group in the way they made me a part of this. It was summer, and it was amazing. By far one of the best experiences I ever had. We played games throughout a whole week, went bowling, ate too much junk food, all the good stuff. I went home feeling something I had never felt before. Wanted by someone. The next winter I go to join them again through New Year's celebration. Everything is going great until I meet one of the guy's girlfriend. Let's call her Stella. There's this instant connection that sometimes happens. Most of you will probably understand what I'm talking about. We just click and smell talk, have fun, and I think nothing of it. Remember, Stella is the girlfriend of one of the guys in the friend group. The New Year's Eve goes as planned. The weather is shit, rainy and cold. Stella was wearing a dress, so I borrow her my jacket because I could tell she was cold. I remember her thanking me and looking in my eyes, and right there is where this story should end. Had I known then what I know now, I would have understood the type of path I was heading down and strayed far away from it. But I was a stupid 16-year-old kid. Things never escalated past that point physically. All it ever was me putting my jacket on her. But after I returned back home, the two of us started flirting as teens do. Innocently at first, but it quickly turned sexual. Stella eventually got busted by her boyfriend, who in turn confronted me through text messages. They broke up. He discarded me completely, and any idea of ever returning to being a part of that friend group was completely gone. Looking back, this strikes me as one of the greatest regrets in my life. These friends had made me a part of their group when they didn't have to, and I messed it up. I had something I had been looking for my entire youth, and I dropped it entirely. Nothing ever happened between Stella and me. My conscience was far too weighed down by my actions to ever consider it. It is one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life, and something I still think about now and again. I like to think that it helped me grow into a guy who would never actually betray a friend like that ever again. I managed to make new, close friends, but I'll never forget this mistake, and I don't expect to ever be forgiven for it. I sure wouldn't forgive me had it been a friend of mine. If there was one thing I could say, it would be this. Jay, I'm sorry. I faked up. I hope you're well. Was a scrawny little kid in high school, into computers and D&D, and socially awkward, so I was prime real estate for bullying. From about 4th grade until 10th grade I was the target of it. I had 3 primary antagonists, one of whom rode the bus with me. I did my best to ignore him if I was shoved or heckled. Then one day he shoved me down, and I got back up, and he stood over me. "What are you gonna do?" I stood up, then jumped up and socked him right on the bottom of his jaw, and the sound of his teeth clacking together was perfect. He took a few steps back to regain his balance, and just stood there with a very confused look, and a bit of blood from what I assume was a cut tongue. He awkwardly turned away and said nothing. The next day his buddies stopped me in the hallway. Their primary leader shoved me against a wall and hit me with one of the hardest punches I had ever received right into the face. Bloodied and a fair bit angry, I kicked him in the nuts, kicked him in the face when he doubled over, and while he was on his back on the floor, I swung my book bag full of books as hard as I could over my head and down onto his face. He didn't move after that. His other buddy and I went into fist blows and more fist blows until we could get pulled apart. I think I socked my favorite teacher in the melee. The guy I whacked the day before was noticeably absent from the scuffle and told his buddies I'll fight if provoked now. I don't think they believed him. Well, I did. I unloaded many years of bottled up anger onto them in a moment of absolute rage. I had a concussion from being kicked in the head, 2 swollen black eyes, bloody knuckles, and various other small cuts and bruises. And so did they. I was left alone after that. I became friends with 2 of them over the next few years. Backpack receptacle and I never did. Edit. The consequence for the action of hallway B was a week of in-school suspension and a call to my parents. I suppose the consequence of clattering clanky teeth in the jaw was the fight the following day. In high school I caught a lot of shit from this one guy. He was bigger than me. Not much, mind you. But in his mind he was towering over me. He would belittle me verbally, push me, knock books out of my hand, trip me on the stairs, etc. Our sophomore year I had enough. It was the first week of school and he gave me a flat tire as I was walking down the hallway, in a crowded hallway intersection full of freshly minted freshmen trying to find their new classes. I didn't have a plan. I just reacted. I yelled, "Holy shit, Joe had an accident. Hey everybody, clear the way. Joe needs to get to the nurse's office. Come on everybody, this isn't a joke. This guy needs to get changed before his next class." Dude froze in stunned horror as the hallway noise stopped and people began to make an opening for him to move through. I'm guessing out of shock, he just sort of walked through the opening. No denial, no rage, just sort of stunned silence. That was enough to establish the rumor that Big Joe shit his pants. The rumor evolved over time that he wore diapers, that it was a result of a football injury, etc. No one made fun of him, mind you. It was a smallish school. Our graduating class was around 200 students. And while gay was still a regular insult, unless, of course, you actually were gay, in which case, whatever, you do you. Medical conditions were not mocked. But occasionally you'd hear whispers about it, particularly whenever Big Joe would try to do something big and bad. He left me, and most others, that he was bullying, alone after that. Settled him right down like neutering dog. Ran into him after graduation, and, like most people I went to high school with, just acted like we were long lost friends catching up.